Hey, hey, hey! Welcome to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast live vibe on this Monday evening. Thank you guys for joining us. For those who are watching us live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, thank you guys so much. Of course, I'm your girl, Stephanie Hardy, host and creator of this lovely show. But I'm not alone because I am with someone who I have been following for a really long time and someone I'm really glad I have the pleasure of talking with, and she is so accomplished. She is, first of all, a producer of WGN Radio. She's a graduate student at Columbia College in Chicago, Illinois. She's the host of the Chicago Set List. She's also the host and creator of WrestFriends with Teti Chavez. And she's on air with Sports Keto Wrestling. And she's a social media contributor to Wrestling Wind Down with Lo, who's a friend of the pod who's been on before. Her name is Iridian Fierro. How are
Yes.
you, ma'am?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I can't complain, and I'm so glad to have you on. And of course, if you're in the comments and you're watching live, please pop in. We have Lo, who's popped in already on YouTube saying Iridian with a heart emoji. Hey, girl, I can't wait to see you next week. Oh my God, it's going to be great. But yeah, I'm so happy to have you on. So I'm going to start by asking you what I ask all of my guests, and that's when did you fall in love with wrestling?
Oh my goodness. I have been watching wrestling since I was a little girl. Probably around 7 or 8. I'm not too sure like what age it was, but I do remember being at my grandma's house and my uncles were watching it. And I was like, what is this? What is going on? What's happening? I was very confused, but also very entertained. And I think it was a chairs match. Shawn Michaels might have been in the ring. I'm not sure, but chairs were definitely involved. And I'm like, this is insane. It was very dramatic, and I'm very dramatic, so I loved it.
So it was Chairs and Shawn Michaels, and it was
Mhm.
just really dramatic.
Yes, it reminded me of like a telenovela, and I watched a lot of soap operas when I was a kid, and it was just the drama and the action and everything that I wanted, and the fact that it was entertaining. I'm like, this is it. I like this.
I think I've never really heard anyone compare wrestling to a telenovela, but I think that is an amazing comparison to make. It's pretty parallel because, of course, you have all of the action, all of the drama, and
Mhm.
everything. So it's definitely like the equivalent of an action soap opera. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty correct assessment to make. I like that a lot. So with that in mind, when did you also fall in love with audio journalism and sort of wanting to use your voice with that?
Oh man, I've always had a very deeper tone of a voice. So when I was younger, I didn't like to talk because I would get made fun of a lot for my voice, and I was like, oh, like okay, well this is the one that I have. I can't change it. I don't know what to do. But going into finishing up elementary school. My teachers, they wanted me to start speaking more, and once I did that, they were like, "Hey, you have a very good public speaking voice." And I'm like, "I don't think so. I think you got the wrong person. I don't think that's me." But they really pushed me to not be scared, and they would make me host a lot of the assemblies at schools. So I would go out there and present and kind of host the event with the guidance of my teachers. And when I graduated, this is elementary school, one of my teachers came up to me and said, "Hey, I think you should go to Columbia College and study radio." And I was like, "Okay, I guess." And throughout high school, I really tried to work to really come out of my shell because I was still a very shy person. I'm a very shy person in general, so the fact that I do a lot of things online and social media, I feel like is still very crazy to me because I am very shy. So in high school, I was like, okay, I think that I want to do radio because I love music and I've always had radio in my life. You know, I would dance around in my room when I was little and the radio would always be on. So I'm like, okay, I guess it makes sense. And Columbia had a really great program. I went in there for a tour, and the first day it was they put you in a studio and you recorded a script and they gave you feedback. And I'm like, oh my God, this is really cool. I really like this. So I have just always liked music and audio in some sort, but I didn't think that I could do it. And it was really my teachers who really pushed me, and they were like, "You know what? You can do this. Go for it." And I did, and I love radio and anything that's audio related. I really fell in love with once I got to college because they taught me how to do it all there.
That's so crazy that you were made fun of because your voice was deeper. Because it's just like, I feel like as women they feel like, oh, our voices shouldn't necessarily be as deep, and
Mhm.
we sort of feel a sense of insecurity with that.
Yeah.
But my thing is, it's just like, even with our uniqueness, it's like you find a place for it, and it's really clear that a lot of people who are surrounding you, supported you and saw the writing on the wall. It's like they saw, like, okay, her voice is like this and it could fit here. And
Yeah.
even when you weren't sure, they were sure, and you were able to at least, try, your hand in it and see, where your voice fit, and you found it. And I hate that you were made fun of because of that, because your voice is so, I love it. It's so velvety
Oh, thank
and
you so
smooth.
much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I like it. Like, if I was listening to it like every day, like on the radio, I would feel really chill about it.
Oh, you are so kind. Thank you. I'm still getting used to it. I guess over the years, and listening back to it. I don't like listening back to my podcast.
Me neither.
So I so I think it's just something about like, okay, it's okay. I did it. I'm comfortable with it. But yeah, it's just something about listening back to it. I'm like, I already know what I sound like. It's fine.
Yeah, me neither. And it's just so funny because even with listening to myself back, it's like I didn't think I could ever do anything like podcasting ever. And then the more I started doing it, the more people actually will compliment me and tell me, "Oh, you
Mhm.
have a good voice for it." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" Like, this, because this wasn't something I planned to do with my life, but just the
Yeah.
fact that, I started it and people are saying you have a good voice for it is like, it freaks me out. And the only time I listen to myself is when I'm making clips and
Yes.
putting it out there, like I was tonight for Monday Night Raw.
Mhm.
Like, that's the only time I listen to myself. But otherwise, I don't make it a habit of doing it either. So,
Well,
you
that's good to
know,
know.
yeah, we're still trying. We're still,
Yes.
trying to find our way here. But oh, it looks like we have somebody in the comments. Hello, Troy.
Hi, Troy. Love you.
Yeah,
So great. I
Queens,
love
thank
Troy.
you so much. But yeah, I'm glad that you didn't give up on your voice in that way. In the sense that you just decided, oh well, I'm gonna keep doing this and it's gonna work for me.
Yeah, and a lot of people are insecure with their voice, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? You have a great voice." So, it's just a thing of, like, I guess, mentally getting over that.
Yeah, definitely. You also mentioned, I think I might just circle back to that thought,
Mhm.
but when you became a wrestling fan, like, what mostly caught your eye about it and what made you stick with it?
Oh my goodness, the women. I loved Trish and Lita growing up, and that whole storyline. I'm telling you, the soap opera, again, there were so many love stories and there was so much like backstage craziness. I was like, oh my goodness, and they can fight. I think I was very, very young when Trish and Lita main evented Monday Night Raw for the first time. And
Mhm.
I remember crying and like, I knew
Oh.
that it was such a big moment because before that, we had only seen women in bra and panties matches. We just saw women the not the way that we wanted to. It was really hard for me to watch wrestling, especially when like things like that would happen and I would have to explain to my mom like, no, it's not like weird. It's okay. Like I love the women, like you're fine. Um and she was just like, okay, like this is not it. And she was not here for me watching wrestling in general because she just not did not like it. It went past my bedtime. It was on a school night. Like it was
Mhm.
just every box it checked to not like. It's for parents not to be okay with it. And when Trish and Lita main evented, I was like, oh my goodness, this is everything that I wanted in my whole life. And the women have really made me stick with it because I always wanted to be like them. They were my role models, and a lot of the women who are performing today are still my role models. So the women is definitely what made me stay.
I think that's beautiful because a lot of people, I feel like in the wrestling community, a lot of people have a tendency to underestimate, how much the women's division, or even back then as the divas division, even still did for us girls. Because
Mhm,
I remember when I was watching it, I was just watching it simply because these were women and they were girls like me, even though they weren't doing the most favorable things. And
mhm.
you had men, like whistling at them and all kinds of certain stuff like that. It's like they don't take into account how us as girls were still seeing these women as, still reflections of us in a sense, even though it wasn't exactly the most favorable image still. And when you think about Trish and Lita and what they were able to do back then, in terms of main eventing and even their feud all throughout their time together, it's just they just are icons and they're legendary and they deserve all of their flowers. Have you ever met them at some point?
Oh my god. So, I recently met Trish and Lita, which Lita, this was the second time that I met her, and Trish was just so amazing. I was so nervous to meet her, and,
Oh.
it was like I was in line, and it was a bunch of men, and it was very minimal women who were in line to meet her. So, me being, like, one of the first women who was in there, I was like, "Oh my goodness, I love you so much. You're so great." Like, it's a photo, you don't have a lot of time, and I didn't wanna be rude because the line
Hmm.
was so long. So, she's like, "Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it." And she looks you dead in the eye.
She does.
So, it's very intimidating, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, like, you were my childhood hero." I didn't tell her this, but, like, in my head, I'm freaking out, of course, like, she's my everything, my childhood hero, like, this is the reason why I love wrestling, and she was super, super kind, and we took a picture. We did the pose because we had to do the pose. You got a point when you meet Trish.
Yes.
So she was super excited. She's like, "That was a great idea. I haven't done the pose in such a long time." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I love you. Thank you. Have a great day." Like, it was just amazing. And Lita was also fantastic. The second time that I met her, icon. She's a queen. She complimented my makeup, which I will never forget. So I had just a wonderful experience with them both.
Okay, and was this like recently, like this year?
Yes, this was at our C2E2, our Comic Con in Chicago, which was in it was maybe like 3 months ago. And it was just amazing because a lot of other wrestlers were there. And this is where I met Sasha and Naomi also. So they
Mhm.
were incredible. I got to talk to Naomi for a little bit because we got an autograph with her, me and Teddy, and she was just so sweet, such a beautiful soul. Something about them is just so kind and wonderful, and I miss them so much. I hope they come back to wrestling.
Yeah, me too. I remember just looking at so many people who actually met Sasha and Naomi there. And I was just like, y'all are so lucky because I love Sasha. If you look on the back, there's a flag back
Yes.
there. I love her. She's my goat in women's wrestling, period. And I'll argue about it till the day I die. Um, and I love Naomi too because I just watched her from the beginning. So
Yeah.
I was looking at everybody and I was just like, they're so lucky. But also when it comes to Trish and Lita, I was happy to meet them this year too at
Yeah.
Alabama Comic Con. Because at first it was supposed to be JBL, but I guess he pulled out. And then they
Mm.
made it an all women's thing because it was Trish, Lita, and Mickey.
Honestly, that's better than JBL. Well,
That's what a
honestly.
lot of that's what a lot of people, said. And that kind of was in a sense like I would have tried to make the best out of it, but the
Mhm.
idea that it was those three was just really beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I had my first fan table at that large Comic-Con, and then being able to meet them and stuff and then being able to ask them the question on the stage with them, that
Mhm.
blew my mind. I was just like, what the F is going on?
Which I saw those pictures and they looked amazing. I was like, "How? How did this even happen?"
Oh my God. Well, this is really my first time. Well, no, this is my first time telling a guest on the show about it, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
But what happened was they had a panel for women's wrestling, and I went upstairs and left my table, behind to participate in the panel as a guest, and I was
Mhm.
there with my podcast t-shirt on. And Trish Stratus remembered me from having met me the day before because she saw my shirt, and she was like, and when I got up with the microphone and I was like, I had a question and I was like, "Hi, my name is Stephanie." And she was like, "And she has a wrestling podcast." And she remembered me. And I was like, "Oh my God." And so the moderator, MJ, said, "Okay, you have a wrestling podcast? You have a wrestling show?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was telling him everything that I do. And he was like, "Okay, well, you go up there and ask them your question the way that you would if you were on your show. And he let me up there, and I walked up there on the stage and asked my question, and it was really dope to do it. And I was scared, but I still tried to, hold in the
Yeah.
nerves and just conduct the interview the same way that I would have anybody else. And they were really nice about it. They answered my question, and then they asked the same question back at me. I asked them, what was the best advice that they got when they were starting in the business, because everybody was
Mm,
asking them questions about what it was like, during their heyday,
mhm.
and I want to know, what was it like in the beginning when y'all first started? Like, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And they appreciated that question, and they asked me the question right back, and they let me sit up there with them the whole time. It
That was
was just too much.
amazing.
I cried afterward. I went to my boyfriend's house and just wept in his arms. I
Oh,
was just like, "I just can't believe this happened." And then his mom was like, "Is she okay?" And he was just like, "It's okay. It's happy tears." And I was just like, "Yeah."
yeah.
It
You're
was a
like, "Yeah,
lot.
they are."
Yeah, it was a lot, but it was a beautiful moment that I'll cherish forever, those. But I'm really glad that you were able to have those moments, with those people, who inspired you in your journey. Like, that's so great. I'm glad we had that. Even this year is incredible. So, did anybody ever try to make you feel weird about being a wrestling fan?
Oh, all the time, and they get, like, facts wrong, like, even today at work, not, like, so much a weird situation, but, one of my coworkers was like, "Hey, Iridian, how are you? How's your podcast going? Your wrestling WrestleMania, like, podcast?" And I'm like, "No, it's just wrestling, like, WrestleMania happens once a year," and, like, rather than explaining it, I'm just like, "It's good. It's" you don't know what to say, but there's always people who will tell you, okay, wrestling's, is fake. And you're like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, boxing is rigged. Like, make it make sense, right? So there's just sometimes where you kind of have to like be the bigger person and not have to explain yourself all the time, but definitely people give you like a side eye, like, "Oh, you watch wrestling? Like, that's weird." Or, "Oh, I used to watch wrestling back when, Stone Cold was wrestling," who I'm wearing right now, Stone Cold, who we love, right? But
Right.
wrestling is always evolving, always changing, and just because it's not like how it was back then, you can still enjoy it and it's okay, but I find a lot of people will say, "Well, I used to watch it back in the day and now it's not even wrestling." Which arguably now would be more wrestling than back then, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because that's something that irritates me a little bit in pop culture. Whenever, like, say for instance, the show Wild and Out, right?
Mhm.
And then they'll have wrestling guests on there from WWE, and
Yes.
then they'll make all kinds of references to like older people who aren't active in wrestling anymore.
Mhm.
And it's just like, and it bothers me, even though I know, these people aren't diehard fans like I am, and I
Mhm.
understand that. But then sometimes it makes me sad, because it makes me feel like, are you really like watching to try to keep up, or watching or doing research to try to, relate to these people in a more 2022 way? Or are you
Mhm.
just relying on the past, people that you used to watch, but then it's just like after a certain point, after the 90s or something, you just kind of quit? And it
Yeah.
makes me so sad, because I'm just like, those people who wrestle currently, they know the past stuff, but then it's just like wrestling has evolved so much
Mhm.
since then that it just makes you wonder, like, do you care that it's evolved, or are you just stuck?
They're stuck in the past. Like, I feel like a lot of people who don't watch wrestling now, if they would give it a chance, they would really, really love it.
Yeah, they would, because it continues to evolve, and it's just a beautiful show to even watch. There's something for everybody in
Mhm.
wrestling, and then there's not even just one show or one promotion you can watch too.
Yeah,
So,
and a lot
yeah.
of people, they don't get it, and I kind of compare it to other sports to kinda get them to relate to it. I'm like, "Okay, it's kinda the same," but people are like, why do they keep fighting each other?" And I'm like, "Well, football teams keep, going against each other the same way, and there's new people on the roster, and people get drafted, and, people move to different, companies and different leagues, and we all yell at the refs, and we all yell at the coaches. So technically it's like the same thing."
Yes, and we all yell at the commentators when they say something crazy.
We sure do.
Like, it's the same thing, it's just a little bit different, a little bit more, enhanced theatricality behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like it deserves a little bit more respect in that sense when it comes to sports. And it's getting there, but we still have a whiles to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you decide to combine your love of radio and audio work with wrestling in terms of starting your own show or just talking about wrestling in general and in your own way?
Oh man, when I was a junior in my undergrad for college, so I was taking a podcasting class, and this was a requirement to graduate. We all had to make a podcast, and you all had to pick a theme and just make a podcast about it. And I had no idea what I was going to talk about. This was like 2 or 3 weeks into the class, and every one of my classmates had a topic, and I was still lost in the sauce. I had no idea what was happening, and I'm like, I just need to talk about something that I know, something that I like, something that I can really make something out of. And my friend was like, well, you like wrestling, why don't you talk about wrestling? And I'm like, me talk about wrestling? What am I going to do talking about wrestling? That makes no sense. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can talk a little bit about, just kind of what I know, maybe for like a casual fan. Maybe I can do some interviewing because I had just taken a radio interviewing class that I also needed. So I'm like, okay, maybe let's combine the interviewing skills with the wrestling knowledge that I know. So let's put them together. And one of my first interviews for my first podcast, it was called the Power Bomb podcast. It was
Mhm.
with Trey Miguel, who is now doing great and wonderful, fantastic things. We love Trey. And I just couldn't believe that he was like, yeah, let's do the interview. I was like, what? I just reached out to him in his email, and I was like, okay, sure. He said, yes, this is amazing. And he was on my first episode of the Powerbomb podcast in undergrad. And I was able to get some really cool audio clips. And from then it was just history. Like, it was incredible. And my friend was like, well, you do it by yourself. The class ended, and I was like, okay, well, no more podcast. And Teddy and I, we're cousins, and she always talked to me about wrestling, and we were like, you know what, let's start something together. And she came up with the term WrestFriends. I had never heard it before. I'm like, okay, well, that's what we call each other because we love wrestling and we're like best friends and we love each other so much. So WrestFriends it is. And we started with the YouTube channel and then moved on to our podcast.
Okay. So essentially, when you were in school, you were taking this class, and you were just like,
Yeah.
"I don't know exactly what I want to do," but then your friend was like, "Yo, you could talk about wrestling," and that's kind of where it started.
Yeah.
And then the fact that you started, with your first interview being someone in the business like Trey Miguel, like that's a pretty big deal to start off with. And then after that, to move on to do it with you said Teti's your cousin? Your
Yeah,
cousin?
Teddy is my cousin, and we weren't like super knowledgeable that like the other one loved wrestling. So when we both found out that we both loved wrestling, like to the extent that we do, we were like, oh my god, this makes sense. Let's talk about wrestling together.
Mhm. See, that's beautiful that you and your cousin were able to bond in that way and still, grow your friendship from that. So, how would you describe sort of the vibe of Rest Friends for those who are looking for a newer podcast to listen to in terms of wrestling?
Yeah, so our vibe is very much chill. We like to think that if you don't know anything about wrestling, you can still come on our podcast and learn something and have fun and have a good time because we love to talk about the cheesemate. And the cheesemate is the gossip, the backstage drama. Like, we give you a little bit of sazon, a little bit of seasoning, that a little bit of spice that maybe you wouldn't get somewhere else, or maybe you just like to know what's going on and you like to be in the girls chat and in the huddle. So I think that's kind of like the vibe that we give, and we welcome everyone. Everyone is a rest friend. Everyone is a wrestling friend when they listen to the Rest Friends podcast.
Okay, that sounds amazing. I'm really glad that y'all were able to do that. And we got some more stuff going on in the comments. Patrick saying, I agree, there is more wrestling now, especially it's evolved for the women. I remember in the WWF, women were barely getting it. Now the women are main eventing, and I enjoy it. And
Yeah.
then we have another comment from Lo.
Yes.
They deliver the cheese bay, yes. And Troy saying we stand rest
Oh,
friends. Oh,
that's
yes,
so
that's
sweet.
great. Thank you guys for going off in the comments. Continue to do so. Um, but it's really cool that you guys were able to do that and you felt inspired to share your love for wrestling in that way. It kind of sounds a little bit like my show, except it's just
Yes.
me. Cause yeah, my origin story is a bit different. Like I tried to ask as many people as I could who loved wrestling, but some of them didn't have time or others didn't feel comfortable on audio stuff. So,
Yeah.
and I knew I was doing it for the first time and I wasn't experienced, but I was like, okay, well, let me just try and here I am. So, yeah.
But look at you, that's the hustle that a lot of other people don't have. Because they're like, "Oh, well, I want to start a podcast," or they look at maybe people who do have podcasts and they're like, "Well, I could do that." Well, you're not doing it. So we already are 2 steps ahead of you because we are doing it. And like you said you didn't know, and now look, like you have your own show.
Yeah. And it's great. And I love having my own show. It's cool being able to work on it and do, what I want to do
Mhm.
and point it in the direction that I wanted to go in and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it's really cool in that way. But sometimes whenever I look at others, like when I first started, I felt really insecure because I
Mhm.
was just like, all these other podcasts have co-hosts.
Oh.
Like I don't have a co-host. I literally just have me. Is that enough? And
Oh,
it is enough. It is. I've
it is
learned now that it
absolutely
is enough.
enough.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know now that it is, but when I first started, I was like, "Ah," it was I was so scared, but it's okay now. So, what would you say are some of the best moments that you've had during your radio work in terms of you interviewing wrestlers, just interviewing
Yeah.
people, period, whether they be in music or other things as well, sports and stuff too.
So at my first radio job, which I got while I was still in undergrad, I was a producer
Mhm.
and I was making all of the commercials. But I don't know how it happened that everyone at work found out that I was a wrestling fan. But if they asked me about it, I wouldn't say that I wasn't. So we had a contract with WWE, so we would promote their shows and they would give us tickets. And I was like, what? This is crazy. And I would get tickets to go to the show because I was literally the only person at the station who liked wrestling. So whatever
Mhm.
tickets they didn't give away on air, they would give to me and I would be able to go. And that's how Teddy and I went to a lot of WWE shows because we would get them when they came into town. And sometimes with those promotions, they would also offer people for interviews.
Mhm.
And that's when I had some really, really incredible experiences. My first interview was AJ Styles, and
Ooh.
he was fantastic. I think we talked on the phone for like 25 minutes. And the WWE people were like, okay, he's got to go. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm sorry. I'm taking up his time. But also, AJ didn't stop talking. He was telling me his whole life story. He was
Mhm.
great. And I also got to interview Seth Rollins, Elias, who Elias stayed in character the whole time. So it was very, very hard to interview him, but I played along and he was great. And one of my first in-person interviews that I got to do was with Lacey Evans. And Lacey was super, super nice to me. You know, she was in character, but still she was super, super nice to me
Mhm.
behind the cameras, and she was very, very sweet. So I definitely have an appreciation for her just because of how she treated me, you know, when we were on camera and off camera. And when I interview them, I try to stay away from like I feel like I like to do my research, but I like to go a little bit deeper with them and talk to them about their family, about their home life, And when I talked to Lacey about her daughter, she kind of like let her guard down, like her character kind of like, she got out of character for a little bit. And the same thing with AJ. And I think that that's something that, I want to connect with you. So also the viewers and the listeners are able to connect with you in a way that maybe they wouldn't have before. But that my first job really gave me a lot of amazing opportunities, and I'm really, really thankful for that.
Yeah, I could tell because when I was doing research, there was so much that you had already done. And I was just like, this probably is through radio and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But I think it's amazing that you were able to have those experiences at your station, even though it might have felt weird because you were the only one who was a wrestling fan,
Yeah.
but it still opened up lots of opportunities for you. So
Hmm.
that's really impressive and that's really cool. Like,
Yeah,
that's
it was
really awesome.
it was just such a good time. And even now, now I'm at WGN, and they also know that I'm a wrestling fan. And it was recent that I got to interview Moose and Jordan Grace from Impact.
Hmm.
And that happened because the interview was originally offered to one of our sports guys, and he sent it to me, and he's like, "Here you go. I don't know what to do with this. Do you want to interview them? Take it." And I was like, "What? What are you talking? You're the sports guy. Do you need help? Like, I can help you make questions, like I can help you prep." And he's like, "You know about it. Why would I do the interview if you know what's happening?" So I'm like, "Oh my God." So then I got approval for everyone, and everyone was like, "Yeah, record it, post it online, you blog it, everything, promote it, you do you." And I was like, "You guys have way too much faith in me, but I'll take it."
Hey, yes, you have to take it because it's just
Yes.
like, I mean, that one guy was like, "Look, wrestling's not my thing. It's your thing. You take it."
Yeah.
Like that would have literally like made me really excited. Like, okay, you want me to talk to this person? Okay, I got you. Let's do it.
I was shook, and I still think about that. I'm like, I cannot believe this man was just like, "Here you go, there you go, take it." But it was great, and meeting wrestlers is always just such a good time. I love conventions because you just get to meet so many wrestlers, and it's just such a good time, and I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I love conventions too. They're really, really fun. They're amazing. They're like overwhelming depending on how much bigger they are, but they're still really great though. You have to come with your money prepared though.
Oh my goodness, you sure do. Lo and I went to our very first WrestleMania together, this past WrestleMania,
Yeah.
and we went to WrestleCon, and we had never been to WrestleCon before. But when
Mhm.
I tell you, it is like you go in there and you're like overstimulated because there's just so much going on, and you're like, I'm making eye contact with all the wrestlers, and they're
Oh
literally right
Jesus.
there. And it's terrifying. Terrifying. We had to do a lap before we even went to the people who we were supposed to meet with.
Yeah, because you want to see everything, and
Mhm.
first of all, and then you need to, prepare yourself to get in line to meet these
Yes.
people. So I
Mentally
totally get it.
prepare.
Yeah, I totally get it. But yeah, conventions are great. I just want you to send me good vibes or pray for me when I go to
Yes.
New York Comic Con next week.
Oh my
Because,
goodness.
oh
That is
my
gonna be
God,
insane. I'm sending all the positive vibes.
thank you.
I'm
Because
gonna I don't know, I'm gonna buy some sage or something because I know New York Comic Con is like nothing else, and that's only prepping for like San Diego Comic Con. So I everyone who's gonna be at that panel, I'm wishing you amazing, amazing energy. I know Lo's gonna be there too. You guys are just gonna kill it. I know it.
thank you so much. I'm so happy to be a part of it. It's such a big blessing. Because I only just started going to conventions like that in 2019. And that was before I even started the podcast.
Hmm.
And so it's just to be at this point now, it's just really mind blowing. So
Do you have your outfit ready?
yeah, I have my outfit ready for the
Okay.
panel. I'm not
Okay.
cosplaying though, I don't think.
Oh, no, I feel like my brother always, anytime we go to a convention, I go with my brother, and he's like, "Well, why don't you cosplay?" And I'm like, "What if I meet one of the wrestlers that I love? I don't want to take a picture in my cosplay. There's no way."
Why? I met Ric Flair. No, the first con I went to was Alabama Comic Con in
Mhm.
2019, and I met Ric Flair dressed as Captain Marvel, and I don't regret it.
Is the picture amazing? You have to show me the
Oh,
picture later.
I'm gonna
Yes.
send it to you.
Mhm.
But yes, like I took a picture like with him in Captain Marvel's gear, and I don't regret it at all. Cause I
Oh,
knew I
man.
wanted to be Captain Marvel, and I knew he was gonna be there. So I just had to be true to both parts of myself, and I was.
Okay. Yes, and you accepted it. I love
Yes,
that.
yes, and he was cool about it too. So it was great. It was great. So what how do you okay, so since you work in radio and you
Mm,
did talk about your love of music,
yeah.
do you still feel that radio has a place even in the age of streaming music?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I remember when I started my undergrad, a lot of the teachers would be like, "Well, we've been hearing that radio is dying and that radio is dead for years." But radio, I think there's a statistic. Let me bring out my stats that radio is still like the most listened to thing because it's the first thing that you listen to when you get into your car. Even if it's just for a couple seconds before you put on Spotify or whatever you listen to, radio is the first thing, and that's where a lot of people get their news. You know, a lot of places that are not in the United States don't have access to a lot of streaming, so they only listen to the radio. And I have such a love for it that I guess, I've been able to work behind the scenes and both on air, that it's just like it's so magical, and the things that you are able to create on through audio that will make a mental picture in someone's head is like insane. Lo's talking about WrestleCon. She's is also traumatized by the fact that we had to do a laugh.
Yeah, I
I will
figured.
never forget. Oh geez. It's iconic though. It's very iconic. But yes, I think that radio still has a spot. And even with a lot of the apps that you get, there's a tune in app, there's a lot of apps that people have specifically just to listen to the radio. And how do people win concert tickets? By listening to the radio.
Right. Like, cause I want tickets to a football game like that.
Yeah,
Mhm. So
I'm telling you.
I do believe radio is still important. I still like it, every
Yeah.
now and again. It just depends on my mood because a lot of the time during the day when I'm at work, I like to listen to podcasts.
Hmm.
Because I work in a law firm. So
Yeah.
it's like sometimes a lot of the time we have to be quiet and it's easy to listen to a podcast and be quiet of course until you listen to something that's funny, then that just
Hmm.
kind of destroys it. But then when I listen to music, I get the urge to sing, and then that's really loud. And yeah, it's not a mess though. But yeah, I still get it, and I'm glad that radio is still a thing because I don't think I would know what my life would be like if there was no radio. I think I would cry.
Same. Same.
It would be too much if there was no radio. I think, like, it scares me to think about the idea that maybe one day we'll all have children and then they won't have it. It's just like, what?
That's insane. It's
That,
insane.
I hope it doesn't get that way though.
Well, not in our lifetime, at least.
Yeah, I hope not. Oh my god, that would scare me. So, what would you say is the best part of working in radio?
Oh my goodness. Honestly, every day is something different. And I usually work behind the scenes. So I'm in charge right now of booking. So I book the some of the shows that we have. So every day I'm emailing different people, meeting new people, like building my network. And I do like talking to people because honestly, hearing a story that's like not your own is so refreshing, and I feel like people definitely need to step out of their comfort zone and do it more often, because you never know how someone else is doing can actually make you look at your life differently.
Right.
So I think that's really, really great. And I've just met so many great people, so many opportunities. And I feel like you need to make as many friends as possible, because every job that I've ever had has been because someone has recommended me for that job, or is because someone I know. It has never happened that I have applied to a job and they have contacted me because of an application. It's always been because someone that I know or someone that I've worked with has been like, "Oh, I think Iridian would be good for this." So, it's all about who you know, and definitely putting in that work ethic. But radio has just let allowed me to do so many things. It let me go to one of the World Cups that we had here, so many sporting events and so many wrestling shows. So a lot of my greatest experience have been because of radio.
That's beautiful. Like that's really beautiful that you
Yeah.
had that you are listening to all of those stories and really taking them in and sort of ooh, excuse me, applying it to your own story and your own life and stuff. Like that's beautiful. I can appreciate that because I think that's one of the best parts about podcasting too. It's like
Yeah.
you're talking to people who love your one thing, but then they get into it in a very different way outside of how you got into it, and
Yeah.
there's just always so many different stories and it coalesces into one big colorful quilt of love.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes, I love it. So, how do you feel about the state of music now and even its place in wrestling?
Ooh, oh my God. So I love talking about music and wrestling. So I think that music in a lot of ways has gone hand in hand with wrestling. And it's so mainstream that a lot of musicians have talked about wrestling. Like we know Cardi B, she's always talking about wrestling. And there's been
Yes.
so many wrestling references in so many songs. Like I know Bad Bunny is such a huge wrestling fan, which is so great that he has had his moments in the WWE, and he has just always included little hints in his songs. Like he's talked about Jimmy Snuka, he's talked about Eddie Guerrero, he has a song called Booker T. Like I I guess because I love music so much and wrestling, the fact that my two worlds get to collide, I'm like, oh my God, this is just too much for me. This is too much. And for my Chicago Setlist podcast, I was actually able to interview Downstate, who is the band that made the theme song for Cody Rhodes,
Oh my
and
god.
they have a lot of other theme songs. They made Britt Baker's theme song, they made Zack Ryder's theme song. The Miz, his current theme song is by them. So it's he was just telling me about his band's journey and how it went writing that song for Cody and the performance that they had in AEW backstage and then him coming out to it at WrestleMania. Like you just learn a lot of things through people's music, and when it connects to wrestling, it's just on a different level for me and I love it so much.
Oh my
Yes.
god, adrenaline. Everybody loves that song. I
It
I
is
love it
iconic.
too.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. I love it too. And honestly, when it comes to music and wrestling, like it goes together so well. And
Yeah.
I feel weird because um my dad was one of those people who would buy the albums
Mhm.
that WWE would release a lot of the time, and I didn't realize how much I really liked wrestling themes until he bought those CDs like WWE Anthology
Yeah.
or when he or like Forcible Entry or
Mhm.
like the volumes of music that they would have.
Yes.
Like that's the kind of stuff that I love. And even I feel like this is also a deep cut. WWE Originals when Jim Johnson made the music
Oh
and
my
actually
God.
let the wrestler sing it or rap it or whatever.
Yes.
Like I still bump Lillian Garcia's You Don't Know Me to this day.
Oh my goodness. Lo is I'm looking at her in the comments. She's talking about the John Cena album.
That
J-
too.
John Cena's album changed my life. Let me tell you. Like
Yes.
he is my favorite wrestler, my favorite person, but John Cena's songs just hit different. Like this man did not have to go so hard in the studio for all of his music. There was no
He did
reason.
it.
No reason. It's amazing.
He didn't. But what's so funny is it's almost like if you didn't know that he was a rapper, you almost couldn't tell now. But
Yes.
if you really think about it, like he really had a full on music career. Like it's crazy.
It's insane. And you know what? In WWE, they have had some really, really good highlights, especially with marketing. I always remember them around Christmas time, and they would have this commercial run about their merch for WWE Shop. And I still remember that it was like the 12 days of Christmas. And on every day, they would give like something that was like from WWE Shop. And on the first day of Christmas was always a John Cena My Life DVD. So it would be,
Oh,
so yeah, it was amazing. And I'm like, why don't they bring that marketing back? It was a song, it was catchy. And then it ended with like a John Cena My Life DVD. And I'm like, oh my
wait, I
God,
feel like I
amazing.
remember that. I vaguely remember that.
Yes, and it was like 2 DX hats and then like something else. I have to look this up. I've never been able to find it.
Oh my god, that's so crazy. That's almost like I feel like even with their shop.com commercials, I
Yes.
discovered like the song. I forgot the name of it, but it's like all of these things make me
Oh,
who I am.
yes.
Like I never forgot that song because of that commercial.
Mhm.
Never. Like I never forgot about it.
And
And
that's
it's
genius on
crazy.
their part because you remember it.
Yes, and even with WrestleMania this year and how they have The Weeknd, who I think deserves so much credit for having his theme song for 3 WrestleManias in a row.
All the time.
Like,
And Pitbull. Pitbull is
oh yes,
also
him
always
too.
there, Lord.
Yeah, and it's just like even this year with their commercials for Texas, it's like
Mhm.
all you can think about, you can hear sacrifice over and
Yeah.
over again, and then you hear Pat McAfee stupendous in the back. It's so it's so funny. Oh my god.
I love
But
it.
yeah, it works. It works.
Mhm.
It stays with you because every time you hear those songs, you think about wrestling or you think about the event it's attached to.
Yeah.
It never fails. I love it so much. My biggest wish though, as in terms of wrestling theme songs, is that I wish they would bring back Rey Mysterio's old theme. That is
Really?
my song. Oh, Rey Mysterio's old theme song.
Mhm.
Who's that jumping out the sky?
Yeah,
REY Mysterio. Bring that back.
I
Bring
love
it.
that. I love that, but I also love his current theme song, so if it could be like a mashup, that would be good. I feel like a mashup would be good. We don't have enough mashups in wrestling. This is the next topic for the next podcast, that we don't have enough mashups in wrestling.
Yeah, mashups work. Cause I mean, even RK Bro had a little bit of a mashup,
Yeah, they
and
did.
Riddle, still uses it from time to time, but at the same time, I mean, you don't have as much. And then when they did start it, I feel like a lot of people didn't really appreciate them as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe that's the thing we need to manifest. But Rey Mysterio's old theme is the greatest. I love that song. I used to put that song on repeat in the car. Like, oh my god, I love it. I love it. So what are some hobbies that you have outside of wrestling and outside of your audio journalism career?
Oh man. I write. Oh, I don't write as much anymore, but I used to write a lot of poetry. I used to do a lot of open mics and spoken word when I was in high school. And I during quarantine I bought a ukulele. I know like half of one song and it's not that great. Lo can tell you that she's heard it and it's not that great. Um, but yeah, I guess
Oh
those would be
man.
like the two things that I'm really interested in. I used to sketch and draw for a little bit, but I'm not the best artist. So I guess you would say my like pieces are like abstract because you can't tell what they are.
Wow. Well, that's cool though. That those are your hobbies. It's like a mixture of different things in terms of like writing and
Yeah.
even with the ukulele because I feel like during the pandemic like there's so much that um we were doing and not doing at the same time. So I feel
Yeah.
like there's just so many different things that people just pick up. But I think that's cool that you were into so many different things like that.
Yeah, I guess I tried a little bit of a variety. I honestly will pick up one thing and then once I learn how to do it a little bit, then I'll be done with it. Like I was making bracelets for a little bit and then like I guess my new thing is like rhinestoning. So I love rhinestoning all my wrestling tees.
Oh,
And
cool.
I think that that's a hobby that I might stick with because it's kind of relaxing for me. So I think that this one will stick.
Okay, I think
Yeah.
rhinestoning's really cute. Like I like it when stuff is bedazzled. It's just it
Yes.
adds an extra flair to it.
It does add a little bit of something extra because a lot of wrestling t-shirts are not cute. So they do need a little extra
Yeah, they really do. So I want to ask you something that's really I don't feel like it's really deep, but at the same time
Mm,
it's still a good like a very heartfelt question.
yeah.
Um as a woman of color and seeing as this is Hispanic Heritage Month as a Hispanic woman, how is representation what does representation in wrestling and also in radio mean to you? And do you feel like you're a part of that change or that wave?
So when I started my before I started radio, one of my biggest reasons that I wanted to be a radio host was because there was this woman in Chicago named Showbiz Shelley, and she was on my top 40 station. And I honestly grew up listening to her because she would do like the pop culture news and any, when I was getting dropped off to school, she would be telling me what the news was, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I want to be like Showbiz Shelley when I grow up. And when I started doing radio, when I got my first job, I was very, very fortunate that the radio station was majority women. So the only place where there were men was the morning show and the late late show, but midday and the drives, like everything, it was all women. My boss was a woman, my general manager was a woman, so I felt like I was unstoppable because I'm like, there's all women here. So it's amazing. And in regards to wrestling, I had never thought about like being in ring, but when I saw Lillian Garcia, I'm like, oh my God, Lillian, I can do that. I can ring announce. And even seeing, Renee, when she got to do commentary, I'm like, oh, I can do commentary too because Renee's doing it. And I still talk about that being like one of the most recent moments that WWE has really proven that it works. Renee was just so fantastic, and she really did inspire a lot of people because I still think about it like I would have never thought to do that if I hadn't seen Renee do it first. So I think that representation is extremely, extremely important. And I remember seeing Melina on TV for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's got dark hair like me. She's a little tan like me. What is happening? Like, that is incredible. And for you to even see someone that kind of sort of similarly looks like you, it honestly makes such an impact. So me and Teddy talk about this all the time. When we do our podcast, sometimes we say things in Spanish, but of course we always translate them. But we always want to be true to ourselves. Like, we know that as Mexican women, like, our moms only speak Spanish, and would they be able to listen to one of our podcasts? Maybe not, probably not. But when we do talk about them and all the memories we have, like, we always try to incorporate some sort of our culture into the podcast because a lot of people don't know. And, it's just always good for that exposure into your own life to make those deeper connections. But it is so, so important. And I'm glad that there are so many women in our community now, and that we're all connecting, and that we're all really just working hard at it and being positive with each other, because I think that would make it more inclusive and inspire more women to come into this too.
Definitely. Like, I absolutely love seeing all kinds of people in the wrestling space, even in the wrestling broadcasting space. And also even, in wrestling as well, and then also just in music as well, and radio too. And I'm glad that you're a part of that as well, because it's just like there's so much that we all have to offer, not even just even in your community, but also in my community too. And it's just beautiful seeing all the colors and all the different cultures, and all the ways in which we see things, and how we're being bold enough to actually put it out there and be true to ourselves, regardless of whether or not it makes people comfortable or not, because that's not really
Yeah.
necessarily our problem.
Hmm.
We just have to be true to ourselves and our culture, and the right people will hear it, and the right people will embrace it. And I'm really happy that you and Teti are able to create that sort of environment, for people like you and even people who aren't like you.
Yeah.
So I think that's a beautiful thing. So are there any improvements that you would like to see with people in wrestling in terms of Hispanic wrestlers?
Ooh, that's a good question, Stephanie. Let's think about that. Um, I I honestly think if I could see Mexican women represented a little bit more, I think that would be amazing. when Thunder Rosa came out, I was like, what? Oh my God, who is it? She's incredible. I love her so much. She's amazing. Like, that's what I want to see. And she would come out like really, really representing. And it's something that I love about her, that she comes out and she represents, and she's not scared of her culture. Because a lot of people, especially in Mexican culture, and you growing up here, sometimes you shy away from that and you don't want to be so proud of your culture and, to show so much. But I think when people are not afraid to show like who they truly are and where they came from, it's incredible. Like the Lucha Brothers also do a really, really great job. Anytime they have a pay-per-view, some of their entrances have been incredible. And I really, like, Teddy and I were there last time when they won the tag team championships from the Young Bucks in that cage match, and they came out with fire and their gear, and it was just so amazing. And Teddy and I were like, oh my God, we're crying, what's happening? Like, it was just
Oh,
so amazing to see like our culture represented so well like that. So I am just here for all of that, and I definitely think that we need to see more of that televised and in mainstream.
definitely. I agree. Because I remember when I watched that match and I saw them come out like that, I was just like,
Yeah,
this is
this is
beautiful.
cool.
I like this. I like it a lot. I like it. I like it. I like it. I
Yes.
was living for it. It also reminds me of that time Rey Mysterio came out at WrestleMania 22 with that giant headdress.
Oh my God.
It was
Yes.
so beautiful. I was like, come
Amazing.
on.
Amazing. Yes.
It's so pretty. I can't. I can't deal. So, how do you feel about the state of wrestling, and what do you think is really good about it, and what could be improved on it?
So I think that now, and I always say this, like now or 2 weeks ago, like it is the best time to be a wrestling fan because there's literally so much wrestling. There are so many different promotions, and wrestling has never been more accessible than it is now. It's online. People are discovering it through social media. These big moments. Like I remember when Naomi returned at the Royal Rumble, she was all over Twitter. She owned Twitter for like 3 weeks.
She did.
So it was amazing. And people who don't know anything about wrestling, when Bad Bunny was wrestling, they were like, "Oh my God, did you know this was happening?" And I'm just like, "Yes, I did. I watch wrestling. Why did you not know it was happening?" And it's still making news. I know John Cena just granted his 650th wish, which he beat his own record of 600 wishes, which is insane because I think like the most wishes ever granted is like 200. So John Cena has tripled that, which is insane. So the good thing about wrestling is that right now that there's so much of it going around. So you can literally pick and choose what you want. If you don't want to watch something, then don't watch it. But I think that the negativity in sometimes how fans treat other fans and how fans talk about or treat wrestlers is probably like a negative because I feel like if we all just treat each other better, then the community is overall better. But sometimes, you get these people, especially towards women, when you try to talk to a man about wrestling, he's always trying to be like, well, you you watch wrestling? What? Okay, then what was the theme song in SummerSlam in 1990? Like, who cares? What is that
Right.
relevant to me being a fan? Like, make it make sense, Jimmy, or whoever you're talking to at the time. Like you just have to be more open. Like just because someone doesn't watch some kind of wrestling doesn't mean that you should exclude them from the fandom because it's not your fandom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I feel really sorry for women who have gone through that. I only went through that one time, in the sense, but it was from someone that I used to date, and he was gonna argue me down that a certain wrestler had passed, and I knew that they hadn't. And weirdly enough, life coalesced in a way that I have pictures with this wrestler. So, you know, life is amazing. Um but either way, like I hate it when people do that to other people because it's just like I feel like even though there are people who might not know a lot about wrestling, you still have to still be open to them because they might want to learn. Number
Mhm.
one. And then number two, you don't know where people started watching wrestling at. So you can't just throw all kinds of questions at them and just quiz them and make it seem like, oh, well, you're not a fan if you don't know this. For all you know, I could have just started watching wrestling 2 months ago.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't know, what theme song was what at, SummerSlam of 92. And then for some people, if their knowledge is really long and if there's something that they're blanking on, that doesn't make them any less of a fan than you. Like, you're still a fan regardless. So I just feel like that type of behavior, that's gatekeeping,
Mhm.
it's terrible and it's toxic and it does need to stop. And I do agree with you in that sense, and also in what's good about it, because there is so much for us, to embrace and love about it, and it's everywhere. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing and it's a fun time to be a fan. Like, I love it. So this is sort of a fun question.
Ooh.
um who would you say are your top 5 wrestlers of all
Oh.
time? Male, female, or non-binary?
Oh, of all time. Oh man. Oh, this is tough. Okay, so I guess I would definitely have to have John Cena as my number one, just
Mhm.
because he is like one of the reasons that I kept watching wrestling, because I was for John Cena, like for the spinner belt, for the camo, and till
Me
this
too.
day, I'm like, yes, him. Um, Also Trish, because she was really just such an icon and such a really, really important person in my fandom and my sticking to WWE. And she was one of the first women that I saw. So Trish definitely deserves a spot. So she's number two. I would say Britt Baker is my number three. And she's still wrestling. She's new on my list, but the first moment that I saw Britt, I was like, what? She's a dentist? There's no way that she's wrestling and that she's a dentist. And she is, and she is incredible, and she's super, super nice, so sweet. I was able
She
to meet her
is.
at a WrestleCon, and she was literally the sweetest person. So I think she's just amazing in the ring, and she's probably going to be on my Mount Rushmore of women forever. So yes, Britt Baker. And someone, oh man, I have two more people. This is tough. This is really tough because of all time. Definitely Shawn Michaels. I love Shawn Michaels. I think he was just also such a big part of my childhood growing up. And him and DX, like when I guess I started watching when, not the like original DX, but when him, and it was just him and Triple H. So they were just hilarious. And there's just something about people who can make me laugh while also like being athletic and incredible is just fantastic. And he's such a showman. So I
Mhm.
like people who really can like show, complete packages. And my final person, I would say, is William Regal. And a lot of people might be shocked by this, but I love William Regal, and I didn't watch him a lot growing up, so he's very new to me in the sense that like I have had to go back to like research what he did, but he really, really helped a lot of wrestlers, you know, in the back, and he has just been such a great mentor to a lot of people. And when he was the general manager for NXT, he was just fantastic. And he is also very, very kind and just such a gentleman. I also met him at WrestleCon, and I have nothing but wonderful things to say about Mr. William Regal. So those are my top five.
That's a pretty solid top 5, and I love how
Yeah.
you mentioned William Regal, because honestly, it's just like when they made that announcement about Survivor Series being War Games this
Oh,
year, and he won't be able to say it now, it just angers
no.
my soul.
My heart breaks. And also when they had like the war games in AEW, I'm like, but is he gonna say it? But they're like, oh, he can't say it. And I'm just like, what? Like,
Right. Oh, the licensing, the
oh,
the
yes.
drama,
The legal issues.
I hate it. It just stops us from getting what we want at times, and it just
Yeah.
makes me so sad.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the greatest thing that wrestling has given you?
Oh man, it's given me like the mentality that like to shoot for the stars, to dream big. And I feel like there's not a lot of other things that have done that for me. Maybe like superhero movies, but wrestling, like, and wrestlers are real life superheroes. Like, I will this was the hill that I will die on, is that wrestlers are actual superheroes because they are super athletic and they're just able to make you watch them for an entire career and really make you invested in them. Like, I have titles up here because like the I love SmackDown and I love the women on SmackDown. So I bought a title. Like, how crazy is that? That they got me to spend my money on a title because I was so invested in the SmackDown women's division. Like,
Right.
it's just insane. And the fact that I've really come to love wrestling so much that I'm now thinking of it as a career, like, that has made me dream big. And also, this is where John Cena comes in because this is Mr. Never Give Up. So I literally have every John Cena book that he has written about, like, oh, your passions and like motivation stuff. So that's one of the greatest things that wrestling has given me, is just kind of the mentality to dream big.
Definitely. That's beautiful. Like, I definitely agree with that. Like, for me, I would say, even though I know this isn't really about me, it's more about you. But I feel like in this conversation, I feel like it's given me the mentality of believing in the impossible,
Yeah.
because there's no way, if you had asked Stephanie like 5 or 6 years ago what she would be doing, it probably wouldn't be this. It wouldn't be this. It wouldn't. It just wouldn't. And just
Yeah.
the idea that I'm sitting here doing this and gotten all of the experiences that I've had in something that I have always watched with people that I'm close to but never really expressed on such a larger level like now, it blows my mind. And it's scary at times, but then at the same time it also makes me feel very purposeful, like I'm doing something that really means something, and it gives me not goosebumps, but it makes me feel alive.
Yeah, it kind of brings you back to reality a little. It's just like, wow, this is insane. Like, I'm actually doing this right now. And it's a good feeling.
Mhm. It really is. So what would you say the future holds for you, Iridian?
Oh man, I would hope that eventually I do work for a wrestling company. If you listen to our podcast, I'm always saying Triple H, my future boss, or I'm saying Cody Rhodes, my future boss, when Cody was still in AEW. So now Tony Khan, my future boss. I feel like it's just to try to be, you have to manifest it. You have to say it and put it into the universe that that's what you want. A lot of people are going to be like, that's fake, whatever. But like, you have to mentally prepare yourself for the things that you want. So you're going to push for it if you do speak it out into existence. I really, really hope that our YouTube just does amazing things and that people love our videos. We are currently on our road to 1,000 subscribers. I think we're like at 910 right now. So we literally only need 90 more people, guys, to hit that 1K. And Teddy and I really love cooking, and we want to incorporate that into WrestFriends somehow and talk about our culture, but also wrestling. So that would probably be the next step for our YouTube. But I would see myself working at a wrestling promotion and hopefully backstage interviewing, because I literally, like, that's my dream. And I know I was going to talk to you about this. Do you remember the WrestleMania? They were looking for someone to like be a backstage interviewer or something for TikTok, and I made all the TikToks, and I know you made all the TikToks, and they didn't pick anyone.
Yes, that was this year.
Yes, they didn't pick anyone, and I was
They
so
didn't pick
mad.
anybody. I was mad too. I was crying, as a matter of fact. I think I've discussed this on the show before, but I did all the TikToks and I even made clips out of interviews that I did last year at NWA for Empower. And I worked really hard and stuff. And when they didn't pick anybody, and when they didn't say who they picked, I was devastated because I was just like, I really wanted to do it, and I got my nails done. I bought shoes and a whole outfit for it and everything, just in case they messaged me or something. And when they didn't, I was devastated. But then as I kept watching the coverage, for the pre-show and then
Mhm.
for WrestleMania Saturday and WrestleMania Sunday, we saw no one, and I was just like, so okay. And then I didn't feel bad anymore. I wasn't upset anymore, but at the same time I was just like, so we went through all of that and nothing.
For nothing. For nothing. And it was a lot of work, right? Like
It
we had
was.
to do our green screen, we had to do our editing, you have to memorize the lines so you're not looking at the camera. Like there was a lot of preparation. And for them to literally be like, okay, sorry, we're not even gonna pick anyone. Like you could have just sent me an email because I was at WrestleMania and I'm just like, okay, did we miss it? Did the TikTok person come out? What's happening? Like they literally picked no one. And they had so many people to choose from.
They did. They did, but here's the thing though, like I heard from someone that I work with the Women's Wrestling Talk, they said that they have the right to do that. So, and
They
if
do, yeah.
they do have the right to do that. So after hearing it from that perspective, I wasn't angry or sad about it anymore cuz that really put a dent in my confidence for a minute. I was just like, so WWE doesn't want me now. Will they ever want me? Like I was it
And
was too much.
that also made me think like you had all these people to pick from. Are we all sucky that you didn't pick a single one of us? Like what?
Oh my god. I just try not to go down that road. But
But it does make me feel better that they didn't pick anyone because I would have been like, oh man, because then I would have constantly been comparing myself to whoever they did pick. So
me
maybe it was
too.
for the better.
Yeah, maybe it was for the better, but I guess that just means down the road, we'll be, actually working for them, or maybe they'll do something like that again. Sometimes I wish they'll do a recruitment for people on broadcasting like the same way they do for wrestlers.
That's amazing. I had never thought about that. They should do
Like
that.
they really should. Like if they did something like that, like for commentary and also for backstage interviewing, I would more than likely go for it and just try.
If they had an NXT that was only for backstage people and for commentators and broadcasters, that would be great.
I would leave here and pack everything and just go.
And move to Florida, wherever they're
Yes,
at. Yes.
yes,
Where's the
like definitely.
PC?
Definitely, I'd have to do it. But Iridian, this was a great conversation for us to have. I'm so happy you were able to come on my show.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. You have been amazing, Stephanie. Amazing.
And you've been an amazing guest to have. If you ever want to come back, please do. But in the meantime, tell everybody where they can find you and follow you and what you've got going on.
Yes, you can find me and Teddy and everything Rest Friends at Rest Friends on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And in our bio, there's going to be a little link tree that will link you to literally everything that we have going on. But also head over to YouTube and type in Rest Friends, and you'll see a lot of amazing videos that we have. My interview with Zach Call from Downstreet, who made the theme song for Cody Rhodes, that's on there. We have a lot of reactions. Sometimes I do makeup, like I have my Darby Allin and my Asuka makeup up there. We literally have everything. We have unboxings and vlogs and reactions, and I feel like there's something for everyone on YouTube at our Rest Friends page. So make sure you head over there. All of our information is up there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And also for those who are new to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, know that you can follow the show on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast and on Twitter at Hardy Wrestle Pod. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and just continue to support the show on Spotify and all other audio platforms like Apple, Google, and iHeartRadio, and so many different places like that. So, thank you guys for joining us for the HWP live vibe. Thank you guys in the comments for joining us and stuff. In between that, this episode will be released this weekend with just the audio part, but this will also be on YouTube probably by the end of the night. So if you missed it, you can go back and watch it. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. You guys have a good Monday night, okay? Bye, y'all.